Hello and welcome to a screencast on setting up an assignment in Atlas. Okay, so here we are on my Atlas workspace. Again, if you click on an Atlas link and open your own Atlas workspace, it should look very similar to this in the management area. If you're not in the management area, at the top you want to go across, select management, and then the tab that we're looking for is this one on assignments. So if we click on that. Okay, so here is the page where you can set up an assignment. So you have the choice up here, top left, to use multiple assignments, which is great. It might be that you want to have more than one assignment set up that you're going to put in Atlas, but please be aware that it still will only create one grade column in Grade Center. So if you have two assignments on this workspace, PebblePad's quite happy with it. It handles it fine. But when you release the grades, a column will be made in Grade Center, and it will be, an average or a total of both assignments that you'll get in Grade Center. If you're required to have, if you've got two assignments that you want to do, but you want them to be in separate grade columns in Grade Center, so your Grade Center can add up correctly, or your weighting in Grade Center can be done correctly, then what I recommend is to have a separate workspace for each of the assignments in Blackboard. So even though that means you can have two assignments in one workspace, because of the element with Grade Center, I would recommend having two separate Atlas workspaces, one for each assessment, and then it will pull into two separate grade columns in Grade Center. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. Got a button here to manage extensions. If you don't know where that is, you've got the ability to pause an assignment, and you've got the ability to stop an assignment. Now, pausing assignments is something you can do. It's halfway through the time of the assignment, something like that. If you pause the assignment, what that will do is make it so from the point that it's paused, all students' work will no longer update. So they can continue working on the piece of work in Pebble Plus happily, but in Atlas, at the point of which you've pressed the pause button, it will have frozen their piece of work. So that's really good if you're going to give feedback at a midpoint. So if you're trying to check, say, how much students have engaged with an assessment, something like that, then by pausing the assignment, you know that even though it might take you 2 or 3 weeks to get through and look at every student's piece of work, the piece of work you look at the end of the 3 weeks, that student will have had just as much time to work on it as the one that you looked at in the first week after you paused it. So that's where that can be useful. Also, in your submissions, by pausing the assignment, it will give you a point of reference where you can roll back all the assignment assessments to that paused point. So that sometimes can be useful for externals. You do, though, have to remember to unpause the assignment so students can submit again. Update, live update their piece of work. You also have a stop assignment. I would recommend, as default, don't stop the assignment. Once you stop the assignment, it cannot be restarted. So, it's all over. So there's no reason why you need to stop the assignment. And like I said, I wouldn't recommend it. Only once you've completely finished everything and it's almost, you're almost at the point of, archiving, that I would recommend doing that. So, when first setting up your assignment, you've got a choice here on whether it's a member-initiated submission or an assessor-initiated submission. Now, I'd recommend leaving it in the default. That's how most people will use it. you would want to select an assessor initiated submission if, say, you had an assessor that was using an iPad, something like that, or a laptop, and was watching a student do something, and were then marking and grading that student's performance. So the assessor would be then filling something out in PebblePad and then submitting that as the assessment for that student. Okay, so that's when you'd use that option. But as with most people, most likely the way that you'll be using it, you want to leave it as it is. You've then got all these options and dates down the left hand side. So the first one is work can be submitted any time after. So that shows when I made this video. Essentially it makes it available from straight away. From the point of which I'm creating this assessment, students will be able to submit to it, which is great. Work cannot be submitted after. So if we click in there, it handily brings up a calendar, which you can go through, find out when it is your deadline. So I pick then, and as you can see, it's picked the date, so the 9th of May 2019, and then the default will be 5 PM. So I'm going to change that now. If you look, we do not have half-hour options, and you can't put in half-hour options. So it's important that when you set up the assessment and you talk about it in Blackboard, that the deadline is, for that I'm going to set mine at 3. So again, very important to make sure students are aware exactly when it is that deadline is. You've then got to, unless this late submission date is set. So as default, it adds a week on. Now I'm going to, you can just leave it as the 9th of May. I'm going to put it as the 10th of July. That's what I wanted to do. What did I have? It's 9th of May, so I'm going to pick 10th of May at 3 o'clock. So I've just given everybody 24 hours where it would be classed as late. Now, please be aware that this late submission, anybody who submits late within this window, it will allow them to submit, but it will flag it. So in the submissions, you'll be able to see that that person's submission was late. So you can then do whatever the appropriate action is for a late submission. It is, however, incredibly unlikely a student is going to submit late. Most people set up auto submit at the very start of the course, or get students to submit, and their assessment can be seen in the submissions from day one of the course, or their induction, or what have you. So you want to be very careful about that, because it's quite likely students already submitted. All it means is, and this is where the bottom box comes in, and is actually the most important, which is work already submitted, which is quite likely students will have already submitted, can be modified until. So it's quite likely on day one they submitted to the Atlas workspace, their work could be seen in the submission, but they've been able to continue to work on it and modify it, okay? And this sets the date and time it can be modified till. So this usually wants to be exactly the same as the work cannot be submitted after. So I'm going to change that from 5 to 3, so 3 o'clock on the 9th of May. So students can go to town, do as much work as they want in Pebble Plus up until that time on that day, in which case it'll be, their submission will be locked. On their Pebble Plus, they can actually continue to work on the piece of work if they so wish, but you won't see it. You won't see it in the submission, and so it won't be marked. Okay, so they're the key parts really about setting up an assignment. Your next option is the maximum number of submissions per user. So again, as default, this is set to unlimited. Now, that sounds good as far as students having choice, but I would not recommend unlimited. If students don't quite understand that they've submitted, let's say at the start, and just to make sure that their work definitely has submitted, they submit again, and then a bit later on they've done a lot of work on it and they go, well, just to be safe, I know it's meant to have updated, but I'll just submit it again. If you have 100 students and they all end up, for one reason or another, submitting 3 times, you will have 300 submissions to work through in your submissions, and you will have to work out for each and every student which one is their up-to-date submission that's the one that they're wanting you to mark. So it can add huge amounts of confusion. So we normally recommend, I would recommend setting this to 1. So students submit once to the workspace, and then going back to this, they can still modify it. So they submit once at the start, and then they modify, add to, adapt that one submission for then the duration of the time that they're working on it. Now and again, this can bring up the odd problem with students submitting the wrong file. You do have options to remove the submission, which will allow the students to then submit again. Or again, if it's right at the deadline and it's, in an emergency or what have you, you can go in after the fact and change that, say, to 2, just to allow a student that's in a real pickle right at the deadline to be able to get in the correct piece of work. You then have this area here. So again, allow submissions from Pebble Plus. I'd recommend leaving that as it is, but then you've got these options: accept all types of assets, or you can restrict submission to a specific asset type. So this allows you to quite often recommend actually selecting this, because if you've, let's say, done, for example, a web folio, so all you want from each student is one submission of one web folio, the equivalent of you wanting just one LibreArch file submitted, but you want all their work to be in that LibreArch file. So you've given them a web folio, all of their work, all of their evidence, you want in that one web folio. You don't want multiple things submitted to mark, or the wrong thing, or for some reason they've submitted just a Word document or something like that. So what you can do is, I'm just sticking here, so I'm just going to say all I want is a portfolio. Again, you can have it as, workbook copy, but all I want is a portfolio, and that will mean that all students can submit is a portfolio, but you've got loads of other choices. And then I would, again, I would leave the rest as default. That's fine. The next option that you have is, do you want to prevent users from removing their submissions? So again, this is personal preference. I would leave it as default. Students have to go out of their way to remove their submission, so it's not something that they're likely to do accidentally, but if they have submitted the wrong thing, they have the ability to remove their own submission, which I think is quite useful. But you can prevent them from doing that if you want, if you tick that box, but I'm going to leave it as default. And then down at the bottom, you've then got submission locking. So depending on the type of assessment that you're doing, you can make it that at the point that students submit, it locks their submission. That's it. They can't do or change anything else. If you're wanting to do that, then you can tick that box and it will permanently lock the submission. As default, this isn't ticked, and as default, you really don't want to tick that box, because it's quite likely that you're wanting them to submit, but then to continue to work on that submission, that you want that submission to be able to be modified. If I just scroll back up to your deadline date, work already submitted can be modified until, and that's that's when students won't be able to work in it anymore. If you tick this bottom box, they won't. As soon as it's submitted, they can no longer work on it. Anyway, just to clear that point up. Once you've done all that, you can click on Save at the bottom. Okay, assignment saved successfully. So I now have set up my assignment. Okay, so you do have the choice. If you're only using one assignment and you're happy for it to be called, and you're happy that it's called assignment 1, that's great. If you want multiple assignments, you can carry on watching. So you've got the button here to use multiple assignments, and if you click on that, so again, this is where you can now change the name of your assignment 1 if you want to give it a specific name. So I will do portfolio 1 in this case, and again you can add a description. So I'll have your first assessment and click continue. Okay, so oddly now I've saved that as my the name of my first assignment, and then now it's brought me into the screen to set up my next assignment. So again, exactly the same process, but now I can add my title. That'll be my assignment 2, and then the rest of the process, as you can see as I've scrolled down, is exactly the same. Okay, and then you'll have 2 assignments. If you're wanting to set up auto submissions, when you add the resources that you're wanting to be auto submitted, there's a little drop down box, and you'll be able to select which one of your assignments, whether it's assignment 1 or assignment 2 or however you've named it, that you're going to submit to. Okay, so click back there, and then on your assignments page, you'll be able to see your assignment or your multiple assignments. Because mine's now changed to portfolio 1. You've got a key summary of the dates, and then you've got the ability here to pause the assignment, stop it, manage extensions. You can edit the assignment and make changes to that, and again you can delete the assignment if you want to as well. And that's assignments. If you've got any questions or anything that you want to add on the website that you may have found this video on, you can add comments and ask any questions that you like, and we can put that in our frequently asked questions, or again, if it's something that we've missed, we'll make another screencast for it or update this one. Thank you very much.